Well, greetings everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of the amazing show we call the Inworld Review, the news and discussion show that is focused on the many worlds that we call the metaverse, or the open simulators that make up the hypergrid. Some of them not on the hypergrid, some of them walled gardens like Yodi Second Lifey. Yes, that place. And exciting new things are coming your way to High Fidelity, for example, and possibly Second Life version 2 without a name. All sorts of things. Anyway, we're here to talk about it. We're broadcasting live from the our MetaWorld Broadcasting HQ on the Great Canadian Grid this week. We're here most weeks now, in fact. And it is the 14th already. Is that right? I double check my calendar. Can it possibly be the 14th of March already? It is indeed. And the year, of course, is 2015. We haven't arrived in April yet, so I haven't forgotten. Anyway, on the show, I'm joined, as ever, by regular hosts, Tara Yates. Welcome, Tara. And Tara is silent. And also,
thank you. I had to unmute, so I'm here. Greetings.
Very good. And also,
I don't multitask very well.
And also to Maria Koroloff from Hypergrid Business. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Mel. Always a pleasure.
Indeed. And joining us today, for a very special reason, in fact, is another good friend of the channel. It's Phelan Corrimal, or Kevin Phelan. You can, I think he's agreeable that you call him either, actually. He's from Rockcliffe University, of course. He's very good at coming on the show to chat here now and again. But he's, of course, one of the principal people behind Virtual World's Best Practices for Education, the conference which takes place here on OpenSim and in Second Life, and it starts on Wednesday and continues through to Saturday this week. So he'll no doubt be telling us a bit more about that. Welcome, Phelan.
Great. Thank you very much for having me back on.
Right. Do feel free to. We'll come to VWP in a while. We'll go through the news headlines and things a bit first. Do feel free to chip in as things come up. I'm actually going to pass on headlines until I've loaded them, actually, which means a bit later. So I'm going to go first, cross over to Tara for the latest news from her, which is from Second Life and Critterville and assorted places. So over to you, Tara. And
she's getting herself unmuted. Remember, I'm running a camera too, and so this is the point in the show when I'm trying to move the camera and get myself back where I can see my notes for what I'm going to talk about. So anyway, greetings.
I do know this feeling. Okay, well, yes. Welcome back.
Greetings from the Pacific Northwest in the RL sim, and greetings, one and all on. I should wish you a happy Pi Day. Today is Pi Day, P-I, because the date is 3.14, and it's actually 3.14.15. And how many decimals after that depends upon the time of day. And so there are those who have noted that this is a particularly special Pi Day because you could, based on how you calculated the year, you could carry it out to quite a few decimal points past 159 to whatever the hell it goes after that. I've long since forgotten whatever extra digits I had memorized of pi. Anyhow, so there's that. One thing I'm going to give you an indirect link here to what I thought was a really good article. This appeared this week in MMORPG.com with the title "There's No Shame in Playing Second Life." Now, set aside the playing Second Life thing because that's one that's always set lots of us nerves on edge because we don't consider it a game in the sense that you play a game. This is someone who is a longstanding MMORPG player who also uses Second Life and has used it for a good many years. And noting, he says his account is almost as old as the game as of May 2004, so he really is an old timer. But he says but is playing Second Life something that is embarrassing to admit? And he says, I don't see why it should be. It's pretty much the only tool game / world / thing like it. So why would anyone feel ashamed to take part in the massive sandbox from Linden Lab? And he quotes 2 reasons, which are having family who would not understand it, and 2, actually caring what the internet thinks about them, which is something he does not consider a personal problem. But he had some funny quotes in here, actually coming from someone else's article. Oops, da 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 da. Oh, and I didn't quote that. But this particular piece just caused me to chuckle. And the earlier article was on the subject of how people talk, that the mass media has always been real big on the flying male organs that were noteworthy in the early days of Second Life, and this reputation that Second Life has of being a place for virtual sex. And he says, why even worry about mentioning these unmentionables? Or if you do, and it's not your thing, why not come out and say, I do not play Second Life to have virtual sex? And then he says, and this is the quote, Second Life is not a fart in a crowded elevator. It is a fun virtual world. Don't be afraid to admit that you dig it, even if it can stink sometimes. Anyway, the articles, there's some other good stuff in the article, and as I say, it's MMORPG.com. And the article, there's no shame in playing Second Life HTML. And there's some other code in there I won't even try to read off. Let's see. I'm sure that Maria will cover her article on the subject of Linden Lab, eliminating or cutting off the use of lindens in in OpenSim. There's been at least some reaction to that, including some who are very alarmed by that, and I won't mention any names on their blog posting. Anyway, Avanation is the one who's most particularly affected, and I'll leave that to Maria to talk more about. Coming up this coming week, starting a week from today, is Fashion for Life in Second Life, which is one of the big Relay for Life events, and also a very big event as far as those who are fashionistas or interested in clothes. And they have 9 regions, 7 fashion capitals of the world, and 8 sim sponsors, 113 designers. So it will certainly be a place to go, at least look around on the 2 weeks that it's on. It will obviously be one that will be tricky to get into. If you don't have an avatar that's stripped down to bare bones, this is a good time to get one if you want to go visit. Let's see. Also coming up, as of I think open just today, the Skin Fair 2015 is open. So do check that one out if you are looking for a new skin in Second Life. That one I don't think is associated with Relay for Life, but I don't have all the details in front of me here on that. SL Go, which is the system whereby you can log into Second Life and get full graphics whammy on smartphones and iPads and low-end laptops, now is for new users of SL Go can sign up and pay in lindens. Apparently this is not, paying in lindens is not something that's yet available for those who already have SL Go, and they're sorry about that. It's apparently takes some additional work for them to enable that for existing users. But anyway, so if you haven't checked out SL Go and you're interested in it, now is a good time to sign up if you want to be able to pay in lindens. Let's see, there I had something else here. Where was it? Fashion for Life, I covered that, covered that. Let's see, okay, my last item. Honor McMillan is a semi-regular on the show when we're in Second Life, and Honor does a wonderful blog and she basically, what do you call it, Mal? A news
Oh, another day,
day.
another destination. Yes.
And there we go. Yes, there it is. Well, she has one that I had to check out because it just intrigued me to sound like. It's called the Sparkies, and it's a build by someone who's been here for a while. The Sparkies have joined the residents of a city built on stilts. These people are not backwards by any means. They have a trained personal copter type devices, and they enjoy a life filled with friends and entertainment. You'll notice that, though, that there's something missing: color. And therein lies an interesting element to this. It's a fascinating, wonderful, whimsical build. For those who like artistic stuff and want something to make you smile. It's very cool. As I say, it's the Sparkies, and the destination is Meta LES. Okay. And if you land at sea level, you'll get there. That's the sim name. And on that note, I think I'm done for now. I'll go back to paying attention to cameras.
Well, thank you, Tara. Yes, very good. Right. Yes, I don't really think I have anything much to add on the Second Life front, except, of course, as I said earlier, we'll be talking to Phelan in a few minutes. Starting on Wednesday through to Saturday in Second Life is the Virtual World's Best Practices Conference. On the Thursday afternoon, the sessions are happening on OpenSim, aren't they, on the Avatar grid?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Yep. I wasn't quite sure. We were looking through the agenda this morning, and I thought Thursday morning was too, but then I realized it wasn't. It was in Second Life. So yeah.
Yeah. Last year it was Thursday morning. This year we figured Thursday afternoon.
Right. Okay, so you can follow that all week, as I say, in Second Life, or if you want to see the broadcasts, there are actually several we'll be talking about later, but the main one is at livestream.com/VWBPE. And all the exciting keynotes and everything will be there, as well as presumably links to other channels. Anyway, back up into, and on Thursday, of course, we'll be on the Avacan grid for that. Right. I'm just flicking through my Twitter feed for links throughout the week. Just look me up on Twitter, twitter.com/malburns, or one word. It's one of my feeds anyway, which is the general metaverse stuff. I've got a link here that isn't opening for me, mostly because I'm reading everything on the iPad, and I don't know why it doesn't want the link. Some of the highlights I have here, this was, I don't have the actual link here. You have to look it up on Twitter because it's a Flip It article. 2015 education. Talking of which, yes. Hypergrid education community, finding instruction on offer. This was a sort of guide to education out on the Hypergrid. Probably interests you, Phelan, in that one. Yesterday, well, actually this morning, the Great Canadian Grid here posted on their blog, greatcanadiangrid.ca, places to go, a guide to places to go on this particular grid. Coming up very soon, the news came via Daniel Voyager, WordPress.com. Inworlds are celebrating their 6th birthday, and they've got a new poster, and they've got a preliminary schedule posted online. Inworlds is, of course, sort of what we call a walled garden world, a bit like Second Life, but it is actually also part of OpenSim, even though it's not on the Hypergrid as such. Some interesting side media. The link here goes to magazine.good.is/features. And they had an interesting article. It was just a new media artist's 365 days of adventure in Second Life. And it's literally an article about the guy who's an artist who went into Second Life and spent 365 days doing his thing and then reporting on it. Tavis already mentioned the thing about Linden dollars not being able to be used outside the lab again. Pings from the afterlife.blogspot.co.uk. Pings, P-I-N-G-S, from the afterlife. All one word, the whole lot of that. That's Thursday Ember's blog, and she has a report every week, which just gets longer and longer, basically reporting on the adventures of the Hybrid Safari, which we do every week, and incidental stuff related to that. What else have I got here? A link which claims business virtual reality will emerge at the same time as consumer VR. Don't quite know how that projection was arrived at, but in my experience, the business follows the consumers. But anyway, I love research, don't you? Real politics of a virtual society. There was another link. Yeah, there's a video interview up which was rather interesting. Not the best of filming during the week, but it's on my main blog, and it was an interview with Gentle Heron. Gentle, of course, is the person behind Virtual Ability, which serves the interests of lesser able people using virtual worlds, particularly Second Life. Let me see. Here's a nice one. 3D virtual worlds are a fusion of immersing, visualizing, recording, and role-playing technologies. Yes, quite a handful, that. There's an article on that. A lot of virtual reality stuff, the potential of virtual reality displayed at the Game Developers Conference recently. There's a link there which summarizes a lot of that. An article on virtual technology resurrecting ancient sites. I don't mean ancient websites or virtual world sites. We mean real world buried sites and stuff like that. That kind of thing fascinates me, the idea of restoring buried ruins to not only unbury them but re-render them as the way they were virtually. Road to VR had an interesting piece on inside David Cronenberg, the famous film director, inside the virtual David Cronenberg VR experience with the developers who met him. And there is a new edition too of the Journal of Virtual Worlds Research. You'll find the link on my stream again. This is it's about quarterly it comes out, actually. I mean, basically the journal contains lots of PDF files. The website simply gives you a list of the contents, and then you choose what articles you want to read and download the PDF. Pretty heavyweight stuff and very academic specific, but not half bad. And I think that's about it. Maria managed to get Bubbles and La Baronnie from last week up on the 2 new entries as Hyperica there. And everything hereafter says hypergridbusiness.com. So I think it's about time I handed the mic over to the very person we have here. MissHypergridbusiness.com.
All right. Okay.
Maria, I mean.
All right. And now remind me, did we talk about filtered grids last week?
I think we
Maybe
did.
not.
I think we touched on it. Remember, we did quite a quick news at the beginning last week, and I think
Okay, right.
I think we sort of touched on it. Yeah.
Let's go into it a little bit more detail. What are filtered grids? I did a big story about it because it turns out a lot of people don't know, including a lot of content creators and grid owners. And I was really surprised by this. So everybody knows what an open grid is, or thinks they do. An open grid allows people to connect home-based regions. Open grids are usually hypergrid enabled, but they don't have to be. And hypergrid enabled grids are sometimes open grids, but usually are not. So there's about less than a dozen or so open grids, and there's hundreds of hypergrid enabled grids. So open grids are not that common. Closed grids don't allow anyone to connect regions. the reason why connecting regions is so important in OpenSim is that if you connect a region to a grid, it's like you are the grid owner of that particular region. You own all the content in it. You have access to the database of that region, and you can go in, you can change the permissions. Now, again, you could argue there's a lot of work for a hacker to do for the old stuff that nobody wants that's in OpenSim. There's far easier, better ways to get juicy new content, and, attaching a region to an OpenSim grid is not the most efficient way of a crook to use their resources. But putting that aside, so if you're a content creator and you want to be able to say what happens to your content, you don't want to have an open grid. You don't want to have, if you're paranoid about this, you don't want to have self-hosted regions. So for a long time, people had a choice. Either they were on the hypergrid or they were off the hypergrid. Either they were Inworlds or they were OS grid. Either they could travel everywhere, could take their content to any grid, including open grids, where they could unpack that content and pull it out of the database and do whatever they want to do with it. Or they were trapped on a closed grid and couldn't go anywhere at all. So last year, we started to get something called hypergrid filtering. And this is where you can leave a grid via the hypergrid, but you can only take some content with you. And which content you can take with you is up to the grid, the grid of origin. For example, on Kitely, they were the first filtered grid, and you can teleport out with anything you've created. So if it's your own creation, you can take it anywhere. And also if it's copy and transfer. So, and then they let everybody know this ahead of time. If it's copy and transfer, you can leave the grid. So content creators who don't want their content to leave Kitely just have to make sure that it's not copy transfer. And the third option in Kitely is the exportable content on their market. If it's marked exportable, it can leave. So those are the three filterings on Kitely. For other grids, a common filtering is full perm. So if it's full perm, it can leave. If it's your creations, it can leave. But otherwise, it has to stay on the grid. And grids that filter hypergrid content usually also filter region exports and inventory exports if they offer those exports. So a filtered grid gives you the best combination of content protection if you're a content creator and the freedom to travel the whole hypergrid metaverse. And we've been seeing a growth in filtered grids lately. So obviously, Kitely, Spellscape was the second one that rolled it out last year. And then Third Rock Grid, Great Canadian Grid, Littlefield, and Tangle Grid all also have rolled out filtered exports. And they're still working their way exactly, the balance of, how things are going to work. And I'm sure other grids are paying very close attention to how well it's working out. I applaud this move because it gives people the best of both worlds. Content creators can make sure their scripts are safe, and residents can choose, not to buy local content or only buy content that they can travel with if they want, or pay extra for that kind of content. And they can go all over the whole hypergrid. So I applaud that very strongly. And if the filtering works correctly, and again, this is a new thing that grids are trying out, but if it works correctly, then for the content that's filtered out, it's as good as being on a closed grid. Meaning, nothing will stop a copybot. There's nobody has figured out a way to do it, but it will protect your scripts. It'll protect your mesh rigging. Again, you have to trust the grid owners, because grid owners, whether they're Linden Lab or anybody else, obviously have access to their databases. But if you pick a grid you trust, and it's filtered, and you know what the filtering is, and you're careful to comply with the filtering requirements, you can be sure of whether your content can leave the grid or stays on the grid.
Yeah, just common sense, really. It's like we have messages coming out on this grid during the week, sort of reminding creators and things that they want, to sell them or get them away on the hypergrid. They must put export on, because it's off by default, which seems very wise.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, in order to make this work, obviously, everybody has to know what the policy is. Because the last thing you want to do is go into a closed grid that opens up the next day, and you're like, what? I didn't give permission for my content. I was selling my content full perm, but I didn't mean for it to leave, because by default, unless you have a TOS that says otherwise, by default, a full perm content is licensed only to its grid of origin.
Yeah.
A lot of people also don't know this. Just because it's full perm does not mean you can pick it up and take it somewhere else. And also, full perm content by default is licensed only to its first user. That means that you cannot necessarily distribute it in, say, a store or something else without checking with the original creator. So if you have random full perm items in your store that you don't know where they came from, clean that up.
Yeah. Now you're talking. You reminded me we did actually cover quite a bit of this last week. So I think people have got the message there.
Yeah, well, it never hurts to
reiterate. Yes.
Yes. Well, it's a new topic. I mean, filtering is something that's not, it's just something common that everybody knows, and it's brand new. Okay, so Digital Lisbon is having a crowdfunder to build a city, a virtual location of the city of Lisbon on Kitely, and they need $2,300 for it, and they're using GoFundMe, and I think it's I love their pictures. I don't know. I don't know if they made a strong business case for it, but if people do like Lisbon and want to see something like this done, only $400 is going to go towards content and building. So the rest of it's going to go towards hosting and events, and so that's an excellent use of the money if you want to have, like, say, a club or something, or some other kind of venue that you want to have, in a Portuguese location, and this would be a way for you to get into something like that. The early funders get land and other kind of benefits, on this region. So I think that's really cool, and they're definitely doing it for a very low price. Like I said, most of the money is going to go towards hosting. So Tara already mentioned that Linden Lab is halting the use of Linden dollars in other virtual worlds. And I looked this up, and Linden Lab is actually registered as a money transmitter in the United States. So what this means is they can take money from you and on your behalf give that money to somebody else. And in order to be a money transmitter, you have to check people's identities and do, all the other stuff that Linden Lab does as part of its payment processing process. And I guess as part of that, a couple of years ago it already shut off all the third-party exchanges that bought back Linden dollars. And now they're closing the last loophole, and the last loophole was places like third-party grids like Avanation that accepted Linden dollars for things, because it's a way for you to cash out Linden dollars outside of the Second Life ecosystem.
Right.
Because there's a lower standard of regulations required when your virtual currencies can only be spent in your platform. So if you're Applebee's and you give away gift certificates or gift cards that can only be spent at Applebee's, it's a very different thing than when you issue a gift card with money on it that can be spent anywhere. And if you notice, if you get any of those gift cards for Christmas, that can, like a Visa gift card or a MasterCard gift card, they're usually backed by a bank or by Visa or some other financial institution that already has all those banking licenses in place. You really don't want to set yourself up as a bank. That's extremely, extremely expensive. So Second Life seems to be on the legal side here, and they're doing their bit to clean up their virtual currency operations. Now, one of the things that I mentioned in a comment on one of these discussion threads about what Second Life did was that I recently talked to somebody who's involved in the Lindex and who's currently working on a new payment system. And I don't know how ready they are to going live, but one of the things that came up out of that conversation was a legal status in which business partners can cash out. And when I've written about virtual currencies before, this is how all the others work. So if you're on Facebook or on iTunes or on any other system that accepts these virtual payments, they have business partners that benefit from this. So, for example, on iTunes, there are musicians that sell music on iTunes. And people buy that music with these gift cards and gift certificates. But the musicians don't get paid in gift cards and gift certificates because, they'd rather have cash. And they do get paid in cash because their business partners or their distributors are business partners of iTunes, of Amazon, of Facebook, etc. So like if you're involved with a Facebook game or some kind of iTunes, Apple game or something like that, you're going to be able to pull real money out of that system. And the way you do that is that regular users can't cash out, but business partners that you have full contact information for, full tax ID information for, the business partners are allowed to cash out. And what I'm thinking is maybe this is what Linden Lab is going towards. The merchants who are allowed to cash out have all this information on file. They may be falling into the category of business partners of Linden Lab, and so they are legally allowed to cash out. They're not considered to be average end users of the virtual currency. And if that and since this approach already works for all the other virtual currency applications out there, it makes sense that it would work here. And that could be a model for other grids to follow. So if you're a regular user of this grid, you cannot cash out your currency. But if you are a merchant on this grid and you jump through some bureaucratic paperwork hoops, then you can withdraw your money. And I think that's a good model to follow for any grid. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm passing on something based on what people who have talked to lawyers about this have said and have done.
There's
but that's something for other grids to investigate. So check with your lawyer about that.
Yeah, there was an incidental thing that occurred to me when I first heard that news. It wasn't your article; it was just somewhere, and that is the commission thing. I was never quite sure whether the Avination, I guess, being one of them, whether if you transferred your lindens to another grid, basically, whether those lindens arrived intact or whether lindens took a cut on commission on your cashing out. Whereas when you cash out real money from Linden Labs, of course, they deduct a fee and then give you the value of the lindens minus that fee, don't they? So I was wondering if there was any kind of conflict there where they just didn't, they didn't want.
Well, what I'm betting is that anybody can take your money in Linden Lab. They can set up an account. Like, say, if I'm a grid, Maria's Grid, I can open up a Second Life character called Maria's Grid, and you can give me your lindens.
Yeah.
And in return for your lindens, I can give you land. Now, when I cash out, I will have to pay that fee. So I could pass that fee along to you, or I could take that fee and count it as a marketing expense because here somebody's coming over from Second Life and using this money to buy land on my grid.
Yeah.
So either way, I can see doing that either way. It's up to the grid.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm not getting into Second Life so often these days, and I keep looking at, I keep thinking of my Linden balance in there. That over the course of years, because I never cashed out anything, it's sort of accumulated, and I keep thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice if I could just transfer all them Lindens to Great Canada Grid or Kitely or something like that? And of course, it's
right.
It's all a bit of a nightmare, really.
Well, my Linden balance increases every time I go in there. So I shouldn't have said anything out loud. Maybe they'll figure out why it's doing that and stop it. But was it the case that maybe older avatars automatically got payments or something? I don't know.
I think are you a paid customer of Linden Labs, or you just?
I don't think so.
If you have a
premium account, you get a weekly stipend.
I don't think I have a premium account.
No. Well, then somebody's paying you. And you can see where that money is coming from if you go into your log into Second Life with your avatar and look at your transaction history for the last 30 days. It'll show you where your money, where any income has come from.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you've dumped a tip jar somewhere that you've forgotten about, and everybody so loves hypergrid business that they're tipping you endlessly.
But if you want something to do with it, Rockcliffe's always willing to take donations.
I spend it on clothes.
Oh well, there you go. All right.
All right. All right. So I guess it's manage my lindens. No. Anyway, so I'll deal with that later. Okay. So what else has been happening on the hypergrid?
Yeah, I've been actually looking at your feed, and it's sort of odd. I got entries from 6 days ago, which basically should have been the day after last week's program, but there seem to be things we've already talked about. You mentioned Bjorg last week, for example. And the forensic holodeck you mentioned, didn't you?
Yeah, it's been a very light week for me. I've been working on getting the stats report done, which I'm putting out tomorrow. And so that's been like my big focus, and also my day job. One thing that I did was I talked to Tarna Wells. You remember we had her on the show last week.
Last week, yeah.
So I went to La Baronnie and I visited her regions, and I'm going to have that written up probably maybe this weekend or early next week. That was fun.
Yeah, great.
and I have some columns that have come in over this past week that I need to get edited and get out. So it's going to be a busy time. But yeah, so that's it for me.
You must find time to head south from Inworld Broadcasting to the Malbones estate soon, and have a look around there. It's like an adventure. It's only half built yet, but you can write that up too. It's put that on Iberica because welcoming visitors. And, of course, to the backlogs here as well. So plug time that was. Thank you. Right, okay. Well, let's move on. We'll get into some sort of discussion about news and stuff in a while. I was just checking my video feeds, of which there are loads. I post them up to Tumblr, but you can also get the links to my other Twitter account, which is twitter.com/Malbones_writer. There have been new editions of all the usual programs, and literally this morning, the latest edition of Happy Hunting, which we're a big fan of course. So you can find all that. Just follow the links via the Twitter feed or anywhere else you may happen to know where to go to find those particular films. Right, so let's move into education for a minute. As I said earlier, we're joined today by Phelan Corrimal. Welcome again, Phelan.
Hi, thank you.
Right. Let's start with this year's Virtual Best Practices. This has, of course, been going on for a longish time. I was actually thinking the other day that, of course, the original first Virtual World's Best Practices in Education was organized by what is now Avicon Fleet, Tuke, amongst others. And ironically, it's like full circle because you're not on Fleet Grid, but you're on the Avicon Grid this year as part of your extensibility outside of Second Life. And this is quite interesting because this is, I believe, last year, I forget, you were on, was it OS Grid? You were on last year?
Last year, we attempted to use OS Grid, and the year before that, Jocadia.
Jocadia, that was right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Avicon particularly, I know it's only one day of the 4, but holding the event on Avicon is quite a new departure for you. And I gather the regions that have been built there are literally a carbon copy of the regions that were built for the OpenSim Community Conference, and subsequently they're on the same server hardware, and hopefully performance is going to be just as good.
The folks over at Avicon, they provided us a baseline copy of the Open Simulator regions that they had set up, and then we've done a couple of modifications since then. But I mean, it's been phenomenal. I mean, it's interesting. As a matter of fact, Philippe and I were having a discussion about this a while back, where when people say that they're going to have a conference or an event or something inside OpenSim, there's a lot of grids that are out there where they're just not used to having a lot of people show up all at once. And, as much as they try to do their best with the resources that they have, the nice thing about OpenSim is that you can put it on a USB key and boom, there's a sim, but you're not necessarily going to have 400 people show up on something that's running off of a 46 running a.
Well, we've had people on this program. A chap called Joe Builder springs to mind, who he has, I don't know, he has sort of hundreds and hundreds of regions on the grid, and then he's got another grid and another grid and another grid, and he's got this massive complex of virtual installations literally on his home system. And what he actually does is, I think he's got one region permanently online, but he actually brings them up on demand. It's not a commercial thing like Kitely. It's just the sort of thing, if you want to, if a group of friends want to get together and go speedboat racing across 64 regions, then he'll bring up the region and the speedboats and everything else, and you can do it, which I think is great. But, probably after about 15 or 20 avatars on that region, and that's assuming he's not running his other regions at the same time, there are problems. But then, of course, there are other grids. I mean, here, for example, in Canadian grid, it's up all the while and can clearly cope with reasonably large numbers of people. The great thing about the hypergrid is it can encompass all of this. You might want to do, as Rockcliffe, for example, I don't know, a tutorial session or a lecture where you only expect it very specialized, where you're only expecting a dozen people, and you can find a location to do that doesn't have those heavy requirements. But then, of course, you can do something like this conference, and you've got something like Avacon's facilities, already in there to cope with the onslaught.
Yeah, and this is the nice thing in terms of what Avacon's been doing over the last couple of years is that they've been working with a number of people to go through and to really put OpenSim sort of through its paces in terms of how can we make this thing crash. And yes. So, and that's to a large extent, that's important because, I mean, when you're only dealing with 10, 15, if you've got a small class of, 15 or 20 people, I mean, most grids will accommodate that without a problem. I mean, they might start to break a sweat, but I mean, they'll accommodate it. We come in with 50 avatars and all of a sudden things crash, right? Yeah. And it's for the types of things that we're looking at, it's really nice to have a partner like Avacon that's working with us in order to provide something that's stable for large numbers of people. And we're really sort of looking forward to this. We think that we've tried this this is the third year now that we've tried to branch out into multiple grids. And I'm thinking this is the first time that we're actually not going to crash the grid that we go into. Yeah. So that'll be a good thing.
Well, I must say I have been there and looked around, and the first thing I see is, hey, am I on OSCC or Avacon? But I noticed recently somebody has done a rather nice 3D logo, not your normal logo, but on the stage area. I put it on the credits thing. I don't know. So it looks like it's been modelled in 3D
So I was looking at Avacon's logo and I'm sitting there going, all right, okay, I guess I'm going to have to create a 3D logo for us.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. But you told me just before we came on air, in fact, that very positive response. We'll talk about Second Life in a minute, of course, and the whole conference, but a very positive response in terms of registrations for the Thursday when you will be out there on Avacon. Over 80 registrations said.
Yeah, this is the thing that I'm finding is amazing. I mean, every year we put up a registration page through Eventbrite, and that's because some educators, in order to sort of take the day or a couple of days off to attend the conference, they need a receipt or something to give to their faculty to say, no, this is in fact a real conference, and I'm not just sort of taking off and going golfing or whatever. So we've worked with Eventbrite to provide receipts for these types of things. This year, we've added the registration process in there because we're going to give people have the option to request a temporary avatar that we'll set up in Avacon Grid. And actually, Philippe's working on that for us this weekend. She's just getting those up and running, and the emails on that are all going to go out probably by Sunday night, which is going to be phenomenal. But we had over 80 people register for the OpenSim component of the conference. And we already know from the experience with Second Life that the number of people that register is never the number of people that actually show up. There's always more people that show up than who actually go onto the registration page. So I don't know how many people we're going to get this year, but it's sort of exciting to know that we've got we've got all the presenters, we've got all the volunteers, and then we have another 80 or so people that have taken the time to register. And so I'm thinking we're actually going to have fingers crossed, we're actually going to have a fairly decent crowd in terms of coming out to the grid and having a grid that's stable and being able to, put 100, 150 people in without breaking a sweat. That to me is going to be incredible. This is actually one of the biggest things that I'm sort of looking forward to because it does give us this launching point to then look at other grids and other virtual environments as well.
Well, to be honest,
we've been trying to get this stable.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you've got a full sim auditorium in Second Life, but I mean, there's limits there to how many avatars you can squeeze on that, and they're probably less than what you can get on Avacon, to be honest.
It is, and it's actually that's one of the things that I'm hoping at some point, with where they take Second Life or whatever Second Life 2.0 ends up being, that they sort of give us the potential that we can expand that out. That would actually be a really, really nice thing for conferences like this. So far, we've never actually crashed a 4-sim region. We've crashed single regions before.
Yeah, I know the quadrangle or whatever you call it is Second Life. You're busy filming there when we did Avatar Studio and things, and suddenly one sim would vanish, and it's touch and go whether it would be the stage sim or whether it would be one of the 3 audience sims.
Yeah,
and it always looks very peculiar on camera, I do tell you.
Oh, it does, but I mean the worst that's ever happened to us has been that one region has filled up, but we've never gotten to the point where, because I mean we've got the stage on one region and then the audience sits in the other 3 in order to simulate this environment. So we have gotten to the point where we filled one region completely and just simply no more people can get in there, but we've never had it where we filled all 3. So that brings us up to about 180 almost, in around that range. Right. But each year we keep pushing that limit. And so, right now we can go up to about 240, I think, people in the same space at the same time, not including the volunteers and the presenters in the other region. So we haven't quite hit the breaking point yet, but we keep nudging up towards that number. And when we hit that number, I think we're going to have to sit down with the lab and basically say, okay, something, we're now pushing the boundaries of what your typical setup is. And, maybe we can discuss something for the following year in terms of, taking 4 regions and putting them on a single server as opposed to co-hosting with 23 other or 30 some odd regions, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I presume the lab are doing things like rebooting the servers for you just before it starts and maximizing the problem. Maximizing. I was about to say maximizing the problems, but that's not the way to put it. Doing their best to limit the problems, should I say?
Yeah, and they've actually been pretty good, but I mean we've never taken the discussion the next step further to actually asking them to change the underlying, how they've structured the underlying technology for us. Whereas with Avacon's grid, they know how far they can push, like how many regions they have, how many people they can put on there. We know we can, if we needed to, we know we could go up to 400. With Linden Labs environment, I really don't know how far we could push that particular number. I mean, it may be possible that we could even push it beyond 400 if they were willing to have some of their technical folks sit down with us and sort of jury rig, something in the background that would allow us to do that.
Well, just putting all your sims on one of their most up-to-date servers they've got, for example, would probably help, because I sympathize with Linden Labs. They've been going so long, and their server farm must be a complex of really old servers and brand new servers that they would buy now when they need new ones. And, they can't guarantee any user or customer as a rule a quality of server. You might have 2 regions adjacent to each other, and one of them might be on an old server, another one might be on a new high-speed server, and you can tell usually. But and
to be fair, I mean all of their setup, everything, like all of their administrative systems are set up to so a lot of this stuff is plug and play. It's not as if they've got somebody going in there and individually setting up each server. They've got control panels and other things where they go in and they say, okay, here's a server, put 36 sims on this particular region, and we know, in terms of avatar allocation, what we can and what we can't do, and what we can do with Vivox and these other things that they have connected into the process, right? I mean, if somebody goes to them and says, no, we absolutely have to have 600, then they've got to go back. They've got to figure out the Vivox connections. They've got to figure out how they're going to work the server connections. They're going to have to figure out how they even configure something like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of, to me, I could picture it as being a lot of manual work by a couple of technical gurus going in there and actually having to change things that ideally they don't want people playing around with. So, and it's the difficulty of being big, right? I mean,
exactly. It's a liability in size, isn't it? Really.
Well,
and legacy. You can't scale properly, if you're relying on legacy. Equipment and things.
And to be quite honest, I mean, for 99% of the cases, I mean, what they've got there is perfectly fine for the average user that's walking through the door, right? You get these things like our conference that comes in where we're pushing the limit. You've got things like Relay for Life that's coming up this July, where Relay for Life crashes sims all over the place, right? And
you have hundreds of them, and they still crash. It's another example of something that is having great difficulty scaling. It's big, and it just is dying to get bigger, as it were, and there are limits.
Well, I mean, even Second Life's own birthday party, SLBD or whatever the heck they call it, they have the same problem there, where you have a particular event, and even though they've got a 4-sim quad, I mean, they're inviting the entire grid to show up to this thing, and even there they don't have the back end configured the way Avicon or some of these other places have got their stuff configured. So it'll be interesting once they start to get there and when we start to expand some of these things out, because I know there's been groups that have been dying for the ability to get more than 60 to 80 avatars onto a grid and or onto a region. Sorry, I mean, because we had this discussion with the lab a couple of days ago. You can't call them sims anymore. They have to be called regions.
Yes, we're very familiar in with that business, aren't we, Maria? Region.
But I mean, it's right now we're good. We're in a good position. I mean, we're seeing lots of people come to attend the conference. We're seeing growth in terms of what we're doing. We're seeing a lot of interest in the things that we're doing. We're trying to make archives and videos, like the presentations, slide decks. We've got the journal that comes out after the conference. We have virtual tours that go on in the 3 weeks after the main portion of the conference that goes on. We have all of these add-on things, and we're really trying to take this approach which looks at the entire conference in terms of the fact that the conference itself is really a one-time thing. It's a moment in time that's here and it's gone in a flash. There's all kinds of work that leads up to it, but it's here and it's gone. 4 days is a very, very short period of time to do anything, right? Never mind this. And so a lot of what we try to focus on is to have a preservation of all of the content and the materials and the ideas that go on at that conference, and then to be able to make those materials available for people in the future, so that if you didn't get to the conference, you can still go on to, say, our YouTube channel, and you can get copies of the video from there. You can take a look at the journal and you can get all the abstracts. You can go into SlideShare and you can get copies of the slides, and sort of trying to make the best use of this and trying to manage those particular archives so that especially those particular presentations that really have lasting value. Some presentations we get are very, they're based on a very limited time scale. It's, these particular things are occurring now. We didn't have this ability before. We do have it now. So we're doing something. And 6 months from now, everything's going to change again. So you've got some of those presentations that have a time-sensitive, well, it's a time-sensitive value to them.
Current affairs, really, isn't it?
Yeah. But then we've got all these other things, and we have all these wonderful presentations that, I mean, you go back to 4 or 5 years, like you go back to VWBPE 2, right? So we did back in 2009. I mean, there's presentations that we did then that hold as much value today as they did at the time that they were initially given. And to lose those ideas, those expressions, those concepts, simply because what the technology we're using is a bit of a flash in the pan type of a thing, is to me sort of criminal. So I mean, we're trying as best we can to manage the extension of this. Right?
It's quite fascinating, actually. There was I don't know they're going anymore. I don't think they had a YouTube account, but there was a filming operation going on in Second Life, and I think they just called themselves the Virtual World Preservation Society. And at first I thought, from the publicity, it sounded like they were providing space to, where artists could put Sims that have been taken down, and replaced with new ones because everything passes. But in fact, they were just using video for that purpose. They were saying, well, before this, region goes, we'll film it and archive it as best we can. But what you're doing is totally more important for conferences because obviously it's not the environmental content so much as the actual content of the panels, the speeches, the workshops. But with conferences of your sort, there are, of course, many strands going on at once. So it's almost like going to a world conference. You can't be in every room at every session. There might be a few you don't really care about, but sometimes, you'll think, oh, God, where's the coin? I'm going to have to flip. Do I go to this or do I go to that? Yeah. And, of course, using the media in this way to actually archive stuff means that, you can spend 4 days at the conference choosing whatever agenda you use. You can then spend another 20 days at the conference following what went on in the other rooms, if it's all archived. So, it really does become essential. And from your point of view too, I know from our talk, because we do film the VP1 channel for you in the keynotes, your emphasis has always been on archiving, hasn't it? Archiving comes first. The broadcast comes second, if you put priorities on it, that is. And, there's a staging system there, but the idea that people can always get this after the fact as a living archive is the main priority.
It is, and so I mean, one of the there's a lot of things. Like every year we try new experiments, and every year we do something a little bit different. So I finally found some software that will allow us to set up our own quote unquote TV station. So for because I mean, live stream is not live stream, Vimeo, not Vimeo, but I mean, Ustream and a few of these other providers of live content are now starting to get out of the business of being a content delivery network. Not from the standpoint of the live material that they're providing on an ongoing basis. That's still their primary focus. But in terms of these massive archives of video, right? And quite often a lot of video that is, I guess maybe from their perspective, kind of fluffy type things, right? Yeah. It's like somebody's gone in, they've recorded a game, and 10 years it's still there, and it's sort of like nobody's watching it, nobody cares. So they're putting procedures in place to basically say, look, if your content's not being accessed, if you're not saying that it's important, then we're going to delete it after a period of time. Well, you get groups like ours, and it's sort of like, no. It's, we got to go through and clean up the archives every once in a while to clean out the fluff, but we need to be able to keep this. So,
well, I know with live stream, for example, and I'm sure it's the case with many others. They've elevated their target. They're a service provider, really, but they also sell hardware now, and They came in at a user level, but they're now totally focused on what you might say the level be just below mainstream broadcasters. They're going to corporations who want to be corporate broadcasts, events that don't have contracts on national television or something, and they're really pitching themselves there. And I always have this lurking feeling that this is to the detriment of the free users. They still make money out of free users because they have ads running there, and it doesn't. There's no real incidental costs, but you can see, we're talking about Linden Lab, too big. It's the price of being big. It seems to be happening with live stream, and in a different way with both YouTube and Vimeo. It's not so much that they're monetizing; they're just focusing on the level at which they can monetize best, and maybe to the detriment of other levels that maybe their original users were on. But it's you're right. It's you when you're doing these, it's a price to be paid when we're live streaming this show. Now, for example, it's on a free channel. Our viewers will be seeing little adverts underneath it. But most of our viewers come for the replays, to be honest. They won't be watching now. Some will, but, it's a small group who just can't resist watching live. That was pass on the technical stuff for a minute. Now, you mentioned keynotes and things. I thought maybe we should cover some of the content that's going to be happening. Now, we were talking about Linden Labs, of course, and one of the keynotes, he was actually a keynote last year, is Ebbe Eltberg, and better known in Second Life, of course, is Ebbe Linden, who is the CEO of Linden Labs. I was actually talking to our principal camera this year, earlier today, in fact, and I was saying I really hope Ebbe behaves himself on camera this year, because if you remember, one of the most memorable things about last year was Ebbe came on and he stood in front of his podium instead of behind it, whereas our camera was expecting him to be behind it. And then he insisted on walking around the audience while he was talking.
I tell you, the nerve.
We were trying to, the cameras were trying to follow the guy around whilst he was strolling through the audience, chatting away. And I just hope he stays on the spot this time. It makes life easier for us.
Well, I mean, that's, I think it's kind of neat that he's actually putting himself out there and he's talking to people and he's getting their input, because to be quite honest, we haven't really had that level of engagement since Philip was at the reins. And while we've had a couple of CEOs in between that have sort of made a little bit of an attempt, nobody has really sort of been out there and trying to make those connections the way Philip did, or the way Ebbe's trying to do now. So notwithstanding the fact that the bean counters and the lawyers are still apparently running the shop, the fact that they're taking that into consideration, they're doing that type of outreach, they're trying to bring some sanity back to the entire environment, I think is a very, very positive thing overall for not only for the environment, but also for the community, and potentially for where the community can evolve to as we go forward. Now, where that's going to go over the next little while, I don't know, because there's lots of interesting things that are going on. Unity's introducing some interesting things that are sort of cutting into the Second Life space. Linden Labs is talking about a potential version 2 of this particular platform. High Fidelity is making inroads into their alpha product all the time.
Yeah.
And God only knows what's out there on the horizon. So, there's lots of movement that's happening. It'll be interesting to see where this all goes and where this heads.
I think with Ebbe in particular, what was very obvious last year. It was great to have him, but he was new to the job. He'd only been in there, 6 weeks or 8 weeks before the conference, whereas at least this year, he's got a whole year behind him, and he's been out there exploring and making the connections and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see if the flavor of how he talks and what he talks about differs from what he very optimistically spoke about last year.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very interesting because I mean if I go back even 2 years ago, it's night and day between the way the lab is interacting with us compared to prior to him coming on board. We've had some really good conversations with Peter Gray in terms of lead up to the conference and what have you. So Peter Gray's in charge of all the global marketing and all of that particular type of stuff for the lab.
Yeah. Great
We've
guy.
had some really good discussions with some of the technical and some of the concierge folks leading up to the conference. Like everybody at the lab is starting to be really, really helpful again. And like I said, it's been years since we've seen that. So, I'm really kind of encouraged by that. I'm really thinking that, it's hopefully this isn't another one of these, it's how do I want to put? Well, I want to say
enthusiasm.
Yeah, well, I want to say flash in the pan again, but I've already used that expression, so I don't want to use it twice. But I guess I just did. But I mean, you start down this particular road and you build up expectation, and I hate to say it, but I mean the community's had this build up and let down so many times that if we go through this roller coaster a few more times, I don't know what the end result is going to be, right?
Well, I remember when the education discount disappeared, and some people stuck with it but lowered their regions, and other people came over here to the hypergrid and thought, for what they do, this is just as good, if not better. But there was something else I meant to ask you. I thought to ask you this weeks ago, but it does deal with the lab anyway, and that is, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, in fact, the lab put out a blog post or a notice or something asking people if they were involved in education in Second Life and to let them know about their experiences and everything else. And, typical of me, being a cynic, I was thinking, oh, yeah, they're trying to get lots of information for free, and then they'll go out and PR it saying this is the place for education and look at this person, that person. But it swings and roundabouts too. Did they contact you about that, or have you had any follow-up on that?
It was funny because actually Bevan Whitfield, who is been looking after a lot of our marketing and branding for the conference for this year, she's got a lot of feelers out in terms of different news articles and what have you that come up. So she actually caught it about 3 days before the lab directly contacted us to say we've done this. Could you guys take a look at it? So and of course we had some of those concerns as well in terms of it's because it was just, I understand the intention. It was just the wording of it was just enough off that I can understand why people sort of had that opinion. So, but I mean, to a large extent, I mean, there's and we actually did. We put a very considered post on there in response to what they were asking for, because there's a lot of history, there's a lot of background to everything that we've been doing here. And I mean, Maria's been around long enough. I mean, she can testify to this. I mean, there is so much wonderful content that is out there, and there are so many really, really good key success stories, whether you're talking about Second Life or OpenSim or what have you. I mean, it's just, and all of this has stemmed from what, Philip and the team put together, 10, 12 years ago. So I can understand them wanting to sort of reconnect with these historical roots in terms of, well, what have educators been doing out there? Because there's, and again, I mean, it's unfortunate, but there's been a lot of turnover at the lab. So all of this history, all of this corporate history, all of this knowledge, all of these things that people at Abby's level sort of need to understand in terms of where this has come from, where it's been, and where it's going to. They sort of need to get that education and the only way they can do it is by sitting down and talking to us and asking for our stories. So, yeah, definitely they came and they approached us and we said, yeah, we'd be absolutely glad to help. But I mean,
did they do anything else besides put out the email? Besides put out the blog post? Did they contact the leaders of the community, the organizers?
That part I don't know. I don't know how far they've taken the outreach effort on that. So it'll be, and I'm not quite sure how to find out. Short of just going back to them and straight asking.
Because I've got to say that just putting all the work on the part of the people you're trying to get information from is kind of it looks bad, you know. If you want to know these things, well, make an effort to find them out, you know.
Yeah,
or first of all, you should have known them already. You know, you are the people who should know this, but also, you know, you making the people who are your customers, who are paying you money, do your marketing for you. I mean, it's nice if you can get that to work, but I mean, you at least want to meet them halfway or something.
There is a trap, isn't there, that Linden Labs have often seemed to have fallen into. And it's not just on this thing. It's, you know, the users make the world and everything else, but then they turn around and try and make out it's all theirs. But, you know, look at the marketplaces and the financial exchanges and stuff like that. Users did create it all, but, you know, as soon as the labs saw something good going, they sort of took it under their own auspices. Either bought it up and did it themselves, or, you know, it's like, you know, we'll give you Sandbox and we'll take all the credit for everything you do there. And you know, there was just, you're right, Phelan, you know, there was just something that irked me in the way it was worded, you know, that made me think, oh, you know, they want more information for free, and, you know, they're going to go out there and tell the world that if you're an educator interested in virtual reality, there's only one place to come, Second Life.
Well, there is, and I think to a large extent, though, however, I mean, if you're always going to be that paranoid that you're going to look at the worst of the intention on any communication that comes out of the lab, you're always going to be seeing demons and devils around every single corner. I think, you know, beyond what it was that they were trying to do, I think to a certain extent, you know, the approach we took with it was, okay, you know, we understand the intent of what it is that they're trying to do, notwithstanding the wording of the way it came out. So, you know,
yeah.
We really tried to work within that. We tried to take what they were looking for and put the most positive spin on it, and then sort of go from there. And especially in the response that we gave, we were very much more community focused than we were Linden Lab focused in terms of what we were doing, because it is about the success stories of the community, right? Of which Linden Lab has helped enable. It's not the success stories of Linden Lab. It's you know, this is what the community has done.
Best uses of their platform, basically, and similar ones. Yeah,
pretty much. But I fully agree with Maria in terms of, because I mean, this is a lesson that we've been learning over the last couple of years. When we first started this conference, a lot of what we used to do in terms of our marketing and promotion was based on word of mouth. I mean, we have all these people that are diehard supporters in terms of what we're doing, and they're out there and they're talking to other people, and then we put our marketing, our communications out through Twitter and Facebook and whatever else. Over the last couple of years, we had sort of gotten away from that, right? And we're starting to see this happening especially in the last two conferences, where we've been putting a lot of information out through the social media and the social webs and all these other things. And then we have people coming back to us and saying, oh, I didn't see that. And it's not really that they didn't see it. It's that there's so much information and communication that's going on out there that people are just overloaded with all these things that are sort of reaching out for their attention. So I think if the lab really wants to connect with the community, they really have to do it by putting boots on the ground and having people go out there, and as Maria was saying, connect with the leaders of these particular groups and do exactly what they did with us, which is going out there saying, would you be willing to help us out with these things?
I must say it's a hard call.
Well, okay, if I can get a word, can I add just a thought here?
Yeah.
Phelan, I think your comment about the loss of institutional memory is a significant one, because there has been so much turnover in, who's around at the lab, who's working for Linden Lab these days versus even who was there 5 years ago. And I think that's very, very important. Who knows what records may or may not exist around the lab that are readily accessible to newcomers about what was going on in the education community 5 to 10 years ago. Yeah. So just raising a flag and see who salutes is a perfectly legitimate starting point. And the second thing I was going to comment is it's only been a few weeks since that posting was done. I'd say it's, as you said, I think it's premature to assume that's the only thing they're doing, or the only thing they're going to do. That could just be okay, let's do this, let's see who responds, and then we'll take it from there. So give them a chance.
I think they clearly, as a lab, they clearly have, we mentioned it a couple of times, it's the size thing. I mean, there is no limit to the things you can do, the things you can learn, the places you can see, the art available in Second Life. But there is so much of it that it is also like it sort of almost becomes searching for needles in a haystack. And I think actually one of the things I like about the hypergrid at the moment is that, you do find surprises, but, in some ways, although it's growing and growing very rapidly, it's still a bit manageable.
it is, but I mean, here's the thing, though. I mean, and this is the thing that I find about corporate knowledge and the corporate histories. I can fully understand that the lab probably doesn't necessarily have a really good grasp on this stuff, and the most prime example, here it is, you have Pathfinder and Claudia, who were in the first 5 to 6 years of Second Life, were the ones that really were out there. They were the boots on the ground. They were the ones making connections with the education leaders. They were the ones that were you had the virtual education roundtable. They were there. You had these particular conferences. They were there. You had other stuff in education going on. They were there. And, they had this very personal connection, and they built up this massive community in terms of what was there. And in addition to that, you had other people, right? So the fashion community had their liaisons. The music community had their liaisons. The nonprofit groups had their liaisons. And all of these liaisons that were out there got pushed out the door.
Yeah, it was very funny. I forget who it was. I'm not sure whether it was Mark or not. But, there was a point where sort of suddenly the presence of Linden's Inworld was sort of on the decline because they lost a lot of staff at one point. But I can think of a whole. I won't mention any names. You've mentioned Pathfinder and things already, but I can think of names of Lindens who would always be at the big music gigs, and other ones who'd be at the conferences, and other ones who'd be at the tech talks, and I gathered there was suggestion that for a time. Lindens were banned from coming in worlds and being.
That was just what I was going to say. Yeah, that was my understanding, was that there was a definite directive that they were not to be in world, they were not to be visible in world, and they weren't to be interacting with the community, and that's one thing that happily Ebby promised to do when he started and has lived up to. And if there's any one thing that he has done absolutely right on, it's that.
Yeah,
for that very reason.
I think so. It's a matter of degree. You don't want all your staff sort of just messing around, but you need to employ people, as Kevin points out, really, who are community managers. When you're running a social world of this size, it's there's a level of which part of it is the obligation to govern and police and to be on top of this, platform.
But just the idea. Don't use our company's products. Don't interact with our company's customers is insane.
I know it is.
Right,
Anyway, look,
but
I'm just looking. I'm just looking here, and Kevin, you are wonderful to talk to, Phelan, Kevin. But we always end up. We're terrible on this, where time flies on this show. And believe it or not, we've got about 10 minutes of our target time left. We'll probably go over a bit, but we'll come back. We'll do a little roundup in a few minutes and bring up any general discussion points. But just before I stop focusing on you, so to speak, in all talk of Linden Lab and Beauties of OpenSim and everything else, I was rather hoping you can give us a quick, and it have to be quick, I'm afraid, rundown of what you think of the highlights going to be. The things people should be looking out for, starting with Ebby's keynotes on the first day and,
Oh, well, I mean, it's not just Ebby. I mean,
No.
We've got some incredible speakers this year. I mean, we've got I'm just looking at the speakers page here right at the moment because, like, I've been looking after the logistics. Letty is really the one that's been looking after the speeches. But I mean, we've got Pamela Brovac that's coming. Gord Holden is coming back. I mean, that's wonderful because he's done a number of, he's been on.
Gord is keynoting on OpenSim, isn't he, too? He'll have gone here. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so, we've got, JJ is, for the life of me, I can't pronounce his last name. I am terrible with names.
JJ Sifwanway, I think is but he's from the University of Western Australia, but he's heavily involved in arts and machinery and things. And
So, I mean, like the featured speaker lineup that we have is just absolutely going to be incredible. We've got some really, really good panels this year. This is actually going to be the first year that all the panels are going to be in voice. So as part of the VWBPE 2 channel that we're going to have, we're actually recording them for the first time in 8 years. We're actually going to be recording the panels. So that information is going to start to get added to the archives. We've got a massive machinima portfolio that I'm actually just getting uploaded to the VWBPE 3 channel that we're going to have available.
That surprised me because you had 35 entries for machinima this year.
It actually doesn't surprise me because it's one of those, again, this comes back to what we've just been talking about. I mean, some of these things, in terms of how good a track is all dependent upon whether or not we have people that are capable of outreaching to that community. And so Roxy has some really good support in that Kayvon and Abacus, who were actually co-chairs of the programs the program subcommittee a couple of years back, they're actually working with her specifically on the machinima side of things. So it really doesn't surprise me that we've actually got a very large selection of machinimas that have been submitted.
I guess I was surprised in contrast because I remember hosting a couple of machinima panels for you in previous years. And, we were down to 3 people and it's very difficult to get them to talk after the time. They weren't really used to it. And I felt like there weren't many entries, but maybe I was wrong. Yeah.
Well, and again, that just depends. Like, I mean, as the makeup of the organizational committee changes, I mean, we get people who have better access to different types of communities. So, unfortunately, we sort of lost some of the connections with the machinima community, but we gained some on more of the academic side. So, it really depends upon who's involved with the conference for which particular year. And this year we happen to have this is the thing that I'm really sort of looking forward to. We've got some really good connections with things with machinima, and we've got really good connections with K through 12 this year. And we've got some really good connections with some of the academic community. There's going to be a lot of peer-reviewed type material that's going to be presented this year, which is going to have some really good ongoing value for everybody. We've got three live stream channels that are going to go on this year. This is the first time we've ever done that. And then we've got, I know Lori Vaughn is currently in the process of sorting out a number of virtual exploration tours. So we've got, I believe, 6 of those, which are going to be published early next week in terms of follow-on. So, there's lots of, and then everything that's happening with OpenSim in terms of, the size of just the number of people that have registered for that particular afternoon is, I think there's really going to be a lot that we're offering this year. And it's to me, and last year was a big year for us. Last year was 3,300 people confirmed by the lab, unique IP addresses, the whole work. So we know that there was actually 3,300 people here last year. I don't know. We could be in a position where we could break that this year. I don't know. But there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of buzz. And I think the program that we have this year is actually as good, if not better, than the one we had last year. So I'm looking forward to the entire thing.
Fingers crossed that it all goes
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, that's very good news indeed. It certainly sounds like a great step up from anything you've tried before, logistically anyway. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and especially with an open sim platform that's not going to crash as soon as the 25th person shows up. So
yes,
this will be a good thing.
I do remember in previous years, attempts to film in Kitely and in Joycadia and even OS Grid. OS Grid sort of turned out okay, but it wasn't, I think it was there somebody said to you, why don't you use the conference center, And then, of course, with Ambercon having stepped up, I think we're in for a good time. A very successful thing. Well, I wish you every success with it, Phelan. I will be there, of course, and we'll be working behind the scenes with you. And yes, as you say, very exciting. We are getting near to the end of time, so I'm just going to move. Well, if anybody has something to Tara, Maria, any brief questions, points you want to raise with Phelan before we do a final round?
Well, I'm hoping that Hero or somebody will send me over a preview of the conference. I can post it on Hypergood Business.
Indeed.
Oh, for sure. Bevan's got a update page. What I'll do is I will send you a URL to that link. I think that's probably going to have most of the information that you're looking for.
Okay, I was hoping more for like an article. These are the things that you shouldn't miss. Or, these are the highlights of this year's conference.
Okay, let me see what I can do for you on that. We've got a lot of stuff that's going on, but I will try to get that.
Yeah, I know you guys are busy, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. It's just crazy.
Okay, well, let's do our little roundup here. I'll start with you today, Maria, I think. Basically, I just go around everywhere at the end of the show here saying anything exciting that happened in the last week that they haven't mentioned yet, or anything exciting coming up in the next week or so that they haven't mentioned yet. Emphasis on haven't mentioned yet. Anything, Maria?
I just want to remind people if they have a new grid, to email me. Because I'm putting out the stats report. So please get that to me, maria@hypergoodbusiness.com.
Okay, absolutely wonderful there. Right, and returning to Phelan before Tara wraps up. Anything else on your mind, Phelan? Apart from, I'm sure there is absolutely nothing on your mind, to be honest, except for Virtual World's best practices in education. But you do have Rockcliffe. You have had Avatar Studio. You're involved in a lot of other things. Anything?
Oh yeah. So we are there. We've got a couple of people that have been working on an Inworld game. So this is sort of not quite it's a 3D scavenger hunt, so to speak. And so we're going to be launching a lot of information on that at the conference. That's going to start April 22nd. It's going to go for about 6 weeks.
Is it an educational game?
It's yes, a little bit. So if you happen to learn something, it's not my fault, really. But you may learn some things as you go along.
There was a flimsy excuse for a comic book when I was a kid. Actually, it was very good. It wasn't the Eagle, but its title was always very logical, but probably not the most commercial title. It was just called Look and Learn. And it's you can't pin it down, can you? This is fun, and there's what you learn in the fun. So Yeah.
Well, this is apparently going to be a fairly big deal. They've been working on it for months, and we're going to be The first advertisements on it are going to happen at the conference, and then it's going to kick off on Earth Day on April 22nd. So that's something big that's coming up for us. The other thing is that starting in the May-June timeframe, we're going to start consolidating all of our archives, and with the full intention that by July 1st, URockcliffe TV will become live for the first time. So we've been sitting on that URL for a while. We've been trying to find the right software. We think we've got it. And so all of that material is, that's our sort of target deadline for that. So that's coming up, and that's something that I'm hoping that people will go into and check on, because we're going to have both linear 7x24 standard TV type format on there. Plus, we'll have all the video on demand stuff as well. So we're really sort of looking forward to that. As you know, I've been wanting to put that in place for a number of years.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's been on the agenda after the conference every year.
Yeah, it's just 5 years in a row. It's sort of like, okay, what are we going to do now with this? And like, I think we've got it. I think we're there. So, come April 1st, I'm hoping that's that's going to be the launch date, and boom, Rockcliffe TV. Welcome to it. So.
Right. Tara, you were about to ask Kevin.
Well, I was just going to comment. If this is the same scavenger hunt that I had some early contact about, it is multi-grid and also includes destinations in Second Life, including Chilbo.
Oh, wonderful. So we can take part. We could go scavenging hunting in our various studios.
Exactly.
scattered around the metaverse. Okay, great. Well, Tara, closing thoughts.
Well, just one last thing. It was a news item that we didn't mention. Terry Pratchett, who wrote the Discworld series, passed this past week. And I ran across a quote that somehow seems very fitting. As anyone who's familiar with him knows, he was in Second Life at least once, presenting. But this quote, I think, is very appropriate considering our coverage of virtual environments. And he said, "Real stupidity beats artificial intelligence every time."
Yes. Fair enough. Yes, I agree with that. Okay, let's go with a wrap, because we're out of time, as they say. Okay, I'd like to thank everybody who's been here today. And my thanks to Phelan Corrimal, otherwise known as Kevin Phelan. Thank you, Kevin, and absolutely best of luck with this year's event.
Great, thank you very much.
And thank you as ever to Maria Karloff from Hypergrid Business. Follow her.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And you can follow Maria also on Twitter as MetaMaria, or indeed Hypergrid Business too on Twitter, or hypergridbusiness.com, of course. And you heard the email address a few times anyway, didn't you? So, yes, very good. And yes, and of course, thanks as always to Tara. Thank you, Tara.
You're welcome.
So, little remains to be said. I would just say before we go that I'm slightly uncertain what time we will be recording next week, because Saturday, this time, the Virtual World's Best Practices Conference will still be on. So we may actually do the recording of this and streaming of this at a slightly different time. I'll mention it on Twitter if I have any news on that front. But since you all watch it in replay, we'll figure that out as the time comes. So all I can do now really is sign off. As usual, I will wish you all a very good morning, a good evening, and a good afternoon. I missed that one, didn't I? Yes. But a good tomorrow, depending on wherever and whenever you are. And just for the record, we're now in the UK here. We're only 7 hours different from America. So believe it or not, I normally straddle today and tomorrow while I'm doing this program. But no such luck today. It is still today. And it won't be tomorrow for a few minutes yet. So on that funny little note, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for watching. And bye for now.